pushing and, keep pushing our limits, even though we are tired, we are exhausted. But we just keep pushing for the sake of, like, for a lot of reasons. It could be because I don't want to disappoint my family. It could be because, they all rely on me, and so you have this sense of responsibility and burden. But at some point, you have to consider sort of the cost, like what it is costing you. And when I hear your question, I think about our other community conversation that you should totally join us on. It's called navigate, oh wait, not navigating, cultural fatigue, right? Cultural fatigue. That's a really good one where we do go in depth about conversations like this, right? And how are we able to sort of implement boundaries? And matter of fact, we also have a boundaries community conversation. Look at this. It's like, so all of these things all go together, but keep coming and keep showing up to these community conversations, because we do talk about those things that you're asking about. And with those conversations, specifically with boundaries and being able to navigate cultural fatigue, we do go in depth, and then we also provide some practical tools of how you can manage that, right? But just going back to it, like, I keep thinking about, like, for you giving yourself permission to be okay with, whatever, with taking care of yourself, because a lot of the times, like I said, we're conditioned. It's almost like we are conditioned to, like, we're just conditioned to be able to just give. We're conditioned to just serve for, like, maybe overall well-being of our family, of like our communities, our churches, and things like that. And we're just so preconditioned to do the work, to work, work, work. But there is a cost to all of that, and a lot of times, like, we don't recognize that. So Elizabeth, when you ask your question, I think about, like, just give yourself permission to take care of yourself, because I think a lot of the times we don't do that.
Yeah. And just to add, and that's really good. So just to add on to Sal, just to reemphasize, like a lot of times when people think of self-care, it's like they have to isolate, go away for like a whole week. And if that's what you need, that's okay. But it's important to do those daily self-care. And if it's only 5 minutes, that is, I would rather that than nothing. So it's really like, how do we consent? That's part of how you continue to feed your cup. And it may be doing 5 minutes at like 3 times a day at different points of the day, whatever works for you. And so it doesn't have to be, I have to do this self-care for 1 hour at this time, at this place. It can be literally whatever however that show can benefit you, and however that looks like for you, Elizabeth. So, but yes, and good plug for other classes, Sala. Good girl. And you are absolutely welcome, Elizabeth, for sure. Anybody else have any questions or comments about where we go to the next? If not, good conversation though. I appreciate y'all.
For real. And can I give a shout out to our sister that's tuning in all the way from, did she say Tonga? Just tuning in from Tonga? Two something in the morning, is it? That's what's up. That's what's up. Welcome, welcome.
Bula and Malo Ilele. So, all right. Anger. We talked a little bit about this. Martina brought up a great point, and so I always wanted to talk about this: is the power and privilege, and how it is for women versus men. And so, and we could definitely expand more. We're going to expand on this a little bit more. So for example, I was called every name in the book but my government name when I get angry. I'm just saying. So, but when I saw my male counterparts get angry, it was more of like, oh man, they just angry, just let them go breathe. But if I was angry, I mean, every single name in the book, and it stayed. And I always thought that was really interesting how, again, like we talked about a little bit earlier, how for me growing up, it was the men were allowed to be angry, but if I was, it was a big issue. And so it's and even when women are angry, they get called a B, they get called, trifling, they could call whatever name of the book that you can think of. But if a man was, it's just like, oh man, they just got some angry issues. Let them go cool off, let him go breathe. So that's what I wanted to say about that and parts of that. Sal, is there anything you want to add onto that part?
Nope, not right now.
You do. Anybody else? If not, It's okay. Anger can be used positively and not just negatively. And we'll talk about that because in one of the slides, we talk about why anger is important. And so I always use the example of sports because I'm a big sports person. I just don't want to see a nice rugby player in the middle of the pitch. Like I need him to, whatever anger or it happens in the sports realm, I need them to like rev up. So that's one of the examples I can say that how anger can be used positively and not only negatively. So again, in one of the slides, we'll talk about like why anger truly is important. Any comments? Any questions? Anybody want to share?
I think we are good to go with our Facebook Live.
Okay.
We are good to go now. We had a lot of just a lot of feedback on the Facebook Live, but we are good now. Everything is clear. So if you're tuning in from Facebook, welcome.
Martina, go ahead.
I just want to add on when you say anger can be used positively, I can reflect back on how I used to be doing so. Like it's practical, it's habituation that I get used to do it with some of my friends. Um, we use anger as a form of getting bit like privilege. Like for example, it's not that we have to do it in terms of into a certain stage, like it's very like in a very situation serious stage, not so to say like when you work and then you said when you're in an industries or organization and then you have to use anger positively, but anger, we use anger positively in our daily lives, and I'm sure that everyone has doing shared on.
And just to add on to that, so a lot of times what I work on with clients, especially if they're in the professional realm, and so
yeah,
I talk with them about, I go, is it angry or are you assertive? And they're like, oh, it's more assertive. So it's being mindful of the language that we say to ourselves, because in the workspace, it's more assertive, more directness versus our angry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So the simple story how it goes is that when you say anger can be used positively instead of using it negatively. Some of my group of my friends, we usually go through a lot during the day, and we can just pump up into our lecturer, which is he's very nice and he can let just small stuff pass through his nose, and then we just come up and say, you know what? We're being so mad because you've been arranging so many meetings for us to come up, and you know what? Like we're hungry. And say we're hungry, and then said, oh yeah, you know what? I'll give you guys a treat. But then it's when you said but when you said anger can be used positively, I can reflect and vividly remember that not only that we can go away with like even just come up to a lecture, but to say that I have never been fully conscious or be aware that anger can be positively in our action. What we're doing is that we use anger like positively in a good way, but not in a negative to counter his decision. But still, we will always attend the meeting that he has arranged for us. But yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Listen, I'm not gonna front. If you feed me, I'm there. Okay. I am down for a good, I'll give me some candy, something. So I hear you on that. So thank you, Martina, for sharing that. Anybody else have anything to share? And Sal, let me know if we're good on the Facebook chat as well. And again, welcome back, Facebook.
Yeah. Yes, I think we're good on the Facebook now. And I think Sealy is now able to tune in because he was out for a bit. But just a little bit about the what the anger as can be used in a good way. Absolutely. Because then, another example you can think of is when there's injustice in the world, right? So whenever there's injustice, yeah, we can get angry. Absolutely. It's a right response, right? If there is an injustice that's been done. And so that feeling of anger, it will drive us, right, to make a change or to enforce a change or to advocate for an injustice, right? So that's another example, because a lot of the times when they hear anger, all they think about or what comes to their mind is the behavior, is the response, right? But as you'll learn like later on in tonight's conversation, and how anger is a secondary emotion, like nobody just like snap of their fingers and like they're angry. Like no, it's a secondary emotion for a reason. That means you feel all these other different emotions before you get angry. So one of the things that we do in therapy when we work with clients is we help them to try and be aware of all of their other feelings before it gets to anger. Because if they become aware of it, then they're able to manage it before it even gets to that point. But it is like a buildup. So that's why we say anger is a secondary emotion. It's not a primary one, because before you got angry, you were probably, somebody cut you off, on the road, and you got irritated. And then you got to work and they told you that you have to work extra time or overtime or whatever. And now you're frustrated, right? And so by the time your day goes and you get back home, you're probably like at the tipping point at that point, right? So, and then you're angry, and then it comes out in like behavioral ways, like maybe you're arguing with your spouse or something like that. But you'll learn more about that later on in tonight's conversation. But just wanted to share that example of like how it can be used in a positive way.
For sure. And so just to give an example of what Sala was saying, so what a feeling is one of the most things is important to identify. So I'm just going to give an example like it for what in past situation when I was angry. So that surface feeling is the anger, right? So it's like whatever that behavior is. But if I go to that middle layer, that middle feeling, I'm frustrated. But if I actually go to the root feeling of what it is, because it was because I was hurt and dismissed. So how do I address the root feeling so I don't get to anger all the time? Now sometimes, like I said, anger is necessary and appropriate, and it is our survivor function. But again, if I addressed, like, instead of letting it build up, like Sala was saying, like, is it anger is a secondary emotion? If I actually say to somebody in the initial part, hey man, that really hurt my feelings. I felt really dismissed by you. It's a different conversation than if I just let myself and behaviors of my angry behaviors take over. Any questions? We're gonna watch a short video. It's a 2.5-minute video. Sala and I are teaching our every community conversation about the importance about knowing our bodies, because we are big on teaching self-awareness. So this short clip is talk about truly how your brain, anger works in the brain.
Anger, like fire, can be good at times, but it can also destroy the longer we hold on to it, ravaging relationships and lives. Why do we have it? And why is its grip so powerful? Hi, I'm Peter Montoya from Thrive Union, and I'll be sharing our current thinking on anger as part of our How the Brain Works series. Anger developed to help us react quickly to protect ourselves. It arises primarily from an ancient portion of our brain called the amygdala, which triggers automatic responses when we're threatened, commonly known as fight, flight, or freeze. When distinguishing a threat, the amygdala activates the hypothalamus, which tells our pituitary glands to release the hormones like the stress chemical cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. Before we're even aware, our body is flooded with hormones and neurotransmitters that shoot up our heart rate, energize our muscles, and increase blood pressure, all to get us ready to fight. Systems like digestion and vision are limited, along with our prefrontal cortex, which controls reasoning. Our hippocampus quiets, reducing short-term memory and new memory formation. All this makes us impulsive decision makers who may say harsh words we don't remember after the fact. These reactions helped our ancestors survive wild animal attacks, but the long-term effects ravage our modern bodies. Too much anger compromises our brains and creates high blood pressure, heart disease, and compromised immune systems. Worse, the amygdala has trouble distinguishing modern slights from imaginary threats. So how do we manage our anger? Brain scans of murderers show damaged or less active prefrontal.
Uh-oh, sorry. I don't know what happened.
All this makes us impulsive decision makers who may say harsh words we don't remember after the fact. These reactions helped our ancestors and bodies. Too much anger compromises our brains and creates high blood pressure, heart disease, and compromised immune systems. Worse, the amygdala has trouble distinguishing modern slights from imaginary threats. So how do we manage our anger? Brain scans of murderers show damaged or less active prefrontal cortexes, showing that one key way to combat anger is to strengthen that area. But can you grow gray matter? Yes. Research shows that meditation has been shown to both shrink the amygdala and grow the prefrontal cortex. Research also shows that venting or suppressing anger actually builds it. Instead, mindfully observe your feelings or try reframing them. Imagine learning that the driver who cut you off just lost their child. Your anger would likely immediately turn into compassion. Our imagination can trigger the amygdala or quiet it. Try creating stories that reframe an offender's actions when there is no real threat. And don't forget meditation. Meditation is by far and away the best practice for reducing all recurring negative emotions. Changing how we approach our anger literally changes our brains. It frees us from the tyranny of automatic responses and helps us enjoy greater health, longevity, and fulfillment so we can thrive.
Thrive Union is a real-world community and
Anybody have any questions regarding the video? And Sal and I talked about it a little bit when we started this series. It's like we always learn something new. We've been running these classes for a long time. And so I think one of the things I enjoy about that video, again, it really just truly breaks down in its simplest form so that we can receive it, but how really anger works in the body. And so like one of the things that it says was just like how when we get angry, the front part of our brain, which we break it down when we are, because the small part of our brain, which we call the emotional part of our brain, takes over. And so part of what why they talked about doing meditation and slowing down is because one of the first things that we typically do when we're angry is we stop breathing normally. So what that does is sends like a lot of blood rushing to the brain saying that I'm in danger. So it activates that small emotional part of our brain when we need our front part of our brain, our decision maker, to be online in those situations. Sala, anything you wanted to add to that?
I think maybe just the connection of how it impacts our physical body, right? Like, so just how, like, so for sometimes, like, I think some of the previous feedback that we got from like when we did this conversation is just people are not aware of just how it impacts them physically. They think it's just a feeling, they think it's just an emotion, but it really does impact their physical health. And, you know, you see this when their blood pressure, like it impacts their blood pressure, you know, because it's releasing a lot of those stress hormones. So again, like, you know, when I say anger gets such a bad reputation, it's because people see the behavior, they see the manifestation of anger. But what they don't know is anger is just like all the other emotions, happy, sad, you know, irritated. It's just like all the other emotions, but all it needs is just a little bit of airing, how we say in the other video. All it needs is a little bit of space and acknowledgement to be able to, all right, because all these feelings are, and all these emotions, all they do is it's just letting you know, hey, something is not right here. I need you to pay attention over here. There's an area, maybe somebody said to you that just didn't sit right with you. So you're gonna, you know, you're feeling slighted a bit. You're feeling irritated, and that irritation, the more you don't address it with this other person, it's just gonna build up to anger, right? So but it really does. It really impacts all our emotions and our feelings. All it is just letting us know, hey, pay attention to this. Hey, I'm not okay with this. That's all our feelings are trying to tell us, including anger. It's just letting us know that something is not right. Pay attention to this, right? So it's there for a reason, just like, you know, all of our other emotions. But when we're sitting at these feelings for far too long, it really does impact. Like it says, like the more, let's just say I'm like someone that, you know, I'm feeling angry, and then I just continue to just ruminate on my anger, on why it is, on the reasons why I'm angry, and I just continue to get angry, and I don't have anywhere to express that anger. It really does impact like my blood pressure. And I'm gonna be in my body, what's going on with what we're seeing in the video, it releases like all of these hormones in our brains, even that it's not good for our body. So it does impact like our blood pressure and things like that. So I think if anything from this video is just being able to remember how our feelings and our emotions, including anger, it does impact our physical bodies as well. And there's always that connection.
Well, I mean, just to even just briefly talk about what you just said, even when we have those positive feelings, we give those an airing all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
And
hear
your brain releases all the feel good chemicals when you're experiencing those happy feelings. Absolutely.
Because let me tell you, when I get excited, I call Sala, I text her, send her because it needs an airing. Because
Mhm.
it's one of those that I can't keep this inside of me. It's the same with anger. It needs an airing. Because a lot of times people just think it's just the negative feelings that need to air. It's also our positive ones too. Like how many times have we felt joy, man? We just go tell somebody, or happy, peaceful, elated, all of those negative emotions that we feel too. It's same as we say. Okay.
Right. I think sometimes too people get or why it does get a bad rep is people are usually expressing this emotion in a destructive way versus a constructive way. So anger can be expressed in a constructive way, and that's what we do encourage. We'll get into fights and people are like, oh yeah, that kid is always angry, and it gets a bad reputation because all they see is the behavior, the negative behavior.
Yeah, and like when we see students or kids who they say that about, part of what solid is like, what else is going on? Because one of the things that we say is like, nobody just wakes up angry and say, I'm just gonna go be angry. Something happened, something else is going on, which is what we talk about, what's underneath that. Before we go on, anybody have any questions or want to share or have a comment? And Sala, are we good on?
Oh yeah. Can I just add on?
Yes, Martina, please.
Okay. It's it's a very interesting story and how we've been exchanging this whole conversation and also by watching the videos that we just watched and how anger impacts our body, our life, our decision making. It comes down to a certain point where I could see that the main important thing that it comes to my mind is that we have to pay attention. It's the importance of being conscious and be attentive to what do we feel every day and how do we um engage or how we approach that sort of feeling. For example, you guys were mentioning something about mentioning about anger and if like irritations and somehow if we don't talk about it, it doesn't mean it goes away, it fade off, but it's still there. The thing that's very important here is paying attention and educating youngsters, especially young kids, and allowing them to express their emotions at younger age. I meant whatever, just give them a single like a space where we have our daily conversation in terms of how we do it in a culture where we have the talanoa, the stretching of the fala, where we sit around and talanoa like in the evening in terms of putting that in culturalized in a culture context. I would have to say that the thing that is I feel that makes me find it very important is attention. It's and being attentive and being attentive to feelings and actions, the behavior that is, that behave or act by people daily. But my focus will be based on young kids. It's because if we do not allow or be more attentive or pay more attention to the daily behaviors, it will continue on as a sort of a habit. It's a habituation. They will continue to practice that as they grown up, and they just don't even know what to do and how to deal with it. And it is always that important that somehow that we're sitting in a sort of empirical study, we study that, and somehow we don't come down to a certain level that we have to be more attentive or attend to young kids um you know sort of feelings. But somewhere somehow I know that we are working around that, and to the expertise that you guys add, I'm sure that somewhere somehow they we bring down that to contextualize it and come down to a sense to give it to be more um more community or more societal ideas. So it's making a sense like so I'm saying this in terms of bring it down to my own cultural context. I would say, people be there, educate them, and so they'll bring down the idea and they'll teach the young, especially those English is their second language, so they could understand that being angry is not bad. It's good to express and it's good to say something so we could engage with it. From there, for long-term cause, it will kind of eliminate or approach other social justice issues like suicide, domestic violence, so on and so forth. So that's just what I just want to add on. So thank you.
You're welcome. Love that. Yeah. And so one of the big part of our mission, what Sala and I do, is we really talk about in regards to a lot of these classes is teaching not just the youth, but also our elders about emotional intelligence. It's not really taught. And so a lot of times Sal and I have had the honor of teaching our elders about emotions. And one of the most honoring things that they have said which I would say was that I just didn't know the words. Now I have the words. And I remember when we did this class, there was this 70-year-old woman when we did this class, What's Underneath Your Anger? And she's like, I got it now. Now I know why I was like this. Now I know why my mom was like this, why my grandma was like this. And it's because nobody taught her. And so for her to say in her 70s that she now understands, you could just see the relief on her face. Like for her to say, I didn't know what it was, for her to say, now I know, it's so empowering, and that's why even teaching our youth about, like what you were saying, Martina, was about the importance of sharing the feelings as well. And so we connect that as like, how do we do that with also their parents and the families and the communities as well? So thank you for sharing that. Greatly appreciate that. Sal, anything you wanted to add? Good.
You're
All
good.
right. Okay. Again, anger is important. Why? Again, like Sala was saying a little bit earlier, it's our protector. Anger, the feeling of anger is our protector, protects our physical beings, our values, our beliefs, our other emotions that we may have. It is a true protector. Like I said, what Sala was saying earlier, we'll talk a little bit about, it's literally separating the behavior and the feeling. The feeling of anger is our protector. Next is, again, like Sala was saying a little bit earlier, it makes us aware of an injustice. And it informs us that some boundary of our own, which come to our What's Your Boundary class in about 3 weeks, it talks about a boundary was violated. So again, if you're angry, something happened. And it's like, what was the injustice that happened to me? That why I feel like what boundary was violated. So again, I love what Sala says about feelings in general, and especially anger. It's just a notification. It's a notification that something is going on. So when you're angry, again, it's a notification. And again, anger is important because it's our protector. It makes us aware of an injustice, a boundary was violated. And what anger does, it helps us motivate to solve. It helps us motivate towards a goal, because we don't want to stay angry. We don't want to sit in that feeling of anger because it just doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good. So again, anger is important because it's our protector. It lets us know an injustice happened towards us, a boundary was violated, and it helps us think about what is it that I need to do so that doesn't happen again. Any questions, comments, Sala, if you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, with the anger too, there's an article I read that said, and we're talking about like how the anger and what it does to the brain, and what the brain is doing when people are angry. And I was talking about how, when people are angry, it's like your brain kind of directs all the blood and all of these things towards the muscles. And it directs it towards the muscles, but it restricts it from like, other vital parts of our body. But it directs it towards the muscles because it's prepping up for that fight. It's prepping up for like, that some kind of like a physical, interaction, right? So I thought that was interesting because then it's like, again, like it goes with what you said, you know, that it's important, it's our protector. Like, so all of these things are like happening and it serves a purpose, right? But sometimes when we're not aware of like what it is that we need to do with it, then we end up responding in a destructive way with our emotions and our feelings, right? So then it comes out in like a destructive way. But really this thing is like it's set up to where it benefits us. It's set up to where it benefits us. But a lot of the time, because we don't, for whatever reason, we don't have the skills, nobody taught us how to manage our emotions or identify our emotions or talk about our emotions and all of these things, because for whatever reason, right, we don't have that understanding or that knowledge. So now we respond in a way that's destructive, and we're seen as, you know, labeled or somebody that's angry or whatever the case may be. But really at the same time, it's like, it's not meant for us to stay in that state for a long period of time. We're not meant to stay angry for that long period of time. Like, it's there, you know, because our body is perceiving some kind of a threat. Like, if your boundaries are violated, my body is gonna, you know, feel some type of way if somebody violates my boundaries, right? If my boundaries get violated, you know, my body's already gonna, you know, I'm gonna have some kind of a physical reaction to that, right? So but at the same time, like, our bodies are not designed to stay in that state for a long period of time. Because as we can see, like from the video, like it releases like all of those chemicals in our bodies, and it shows up in like our blood pressure's up, you know, people have heart attack, like we are stressed out. Like, we're not meant to be in that state for a long period of time. Like, it serves a purpose, all of these different feelings and emotions, it serves a purpose for us. And I think that's just so beautiful, but I don't think we're meant to stay in that phase or is that in that state. So which is why it's so important that we recognize, you know, our feelings leading up to it. And if we do get here to where, you know, we are angry, and making sure that we know how to manage that, making sure that we understand, like, well, how am I supposed to respond then? You know, what do I need to do? How do I air out my anger, my frustration in a way that's constructive instead of destructive, right? So
Love that. Great. That's beautiful. Anybody wanna, Elizabeth, floor is yours.
Thank you. I was wondering, since there's this different like of how anger surely shows how it's important because it protects us if, you know, from our values, or like as an like inform us about boundary violation, and or like helps us drive to a goal. Yeah, I was wondering if, you know, for certain people that get mad and then, you know, they throw things, they see red, like they have this urge to break things, like on like what purpose, like Sala mentioned, like, you know, there's a purpose on why we feel these certain emotions. So how is it like, what, I was wondering, like, for those people that get the urge to, like, they need to break something, like it's a type of, I don't know, should I say it's how they air out their anger in a certain way that they need to break something, or they must do this, you know, in a destructive way? Like, is that some sort of how they air out their anger? But, you know, it also it makes the other person, you know, feel threatened because this is how they air it out, and then we don't get it, that's how they do it. And then we feel threatened that they might hurt us. Like, how, like, how do we go about understanding these people need to do this because it air out their anger, and that we should not feel threatened, and we should just leave them alone till they're calmed down or some sort. Thank you.
Question. So I would say, and what you're referring to, Elizabeth, is when somebody gets to rage. Rage is above anger. Rage is when all faculties in the brain are just off, like nothing computes. And so one of the things I'll say when somebody gets to rage, because I've been in those situations where somebody gets to rage, I will remove myself because I'm like, I don't know who they're going to hit, but I don't want to be one of them. You know, so again, that's something completely different, because again, it's they black out. So in regards to what I would say what Sal was talking about is if it doesn't get to rage, because if we get to the point where we want to fight and we want to break something and we want to throw something, that's a little bit different. Because the other part of that is, I would say, is a lot of that sometimes they are just mimicking the behaviors that they saw, you know, growing up a lot of the times. And so if they weren't taught to actually talk it through, they're just going to do what they observed or what they learned. Because one of the funniest things I say to my clients, I say, you know, we always say that we never want to be like our parents, but we are. And they laugh, because it's like, oh man, I realize I'm doing in regards to anger and like the physicalness, that's what my parents showed me, and I want to do it differently now. So again, if you're not taught differently, or even talk how to, again, not get to that surface level of anger or rage, you're only doing what you know. So in that situation, I would say, Elizabeth, is like, make sure that you are protected and safe, and however you need to remove yourself, that's what I would recommend. Does that help, Elizabeth? And then awesome, you're welcome. And then Sala, anything you wanted to add?
No, you're right in kind of differentiating the two with anger and rage. I would say like anger is more so like, you know, it's a feeling that maybe like you experience when you've been wronged. So, and then that goes into what Scarlett was saying earlier. It's like whenever someone violates your boundaries, right? So whenever whenever someone wrongs you, or you feel like someone wronged you or did something wrong that wasn't good, that you didn't agree with, that you didn't like, whatever the case, you could get angry. You could feel angry. And it's usually like, it's because you've experienced being slighted by someone, you know, and someone did you wrong. But I think and with that anger, you can express it in a constructive, healthy way. But when it comes to like, you know, rage, that's a whole different, you know, emotion, which I don't think you have control over that emotion. Like what Scarlett said, where it's almost like blacking out. And that's usually because it's the unconscious. You're kind of like already into your unconscious brain at that point. And rage can turn destructive. And so with that one, with rage, it's safety is key. Utmost at that point is we're not going to try and talk you down or anything, because you're just seeing red. So at this point, I'm going to look at safety. Like, what's my safety going to look like in that situation? And do I need to remove myself, because I need to make sure that my safety is of utmost a concern at that point. And then when this person has kind of maybe come down a level or two where they are able to think, because remember, when they are at that, they're already like, you know, emotional brain when they are feeling angry. But when they're at rage, that's even beyond anger, right? And if there's no almost like, you know, talking them down, maybe I would say like just give them some time, you know, if at that. But yeah, I think that was a good way to be able to distinguish between the two, Scarlett.
Awesome. Yeah, so again, go for safety, Elizabeth. Okay. More than anything. We want to talk about just like briefly what the video talked about, what happens when we do become angry. We come into these, what I call the 4 F's, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So this is our brain's preparation and protection for a physical response, usually trauma, because we all have been through some type of trauma, whether extreme or non. It impacts how you respond. So again, one of the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. So fight is your body's way of facing a perceived threat aggressively. So I have been a fighter. I'm not going to front. So because it was something was violated for me. So typical, what can happen, a fight response can be, you can have a tight jaw, grinding teeth, urge to punch something or someone, need to stomp, cry in anger, and you have like a burning sensation and you feel like you need to attack the source of danger. So those are just some examples of fight. The other thing is flight, is your body's urge to run from danger. I'm a flight person too. Okay. So what I want to say about these 4 F's is that you can experience more than one of these in one situation, and it's okay. It's absolutely okay. So for examples of flight responses, if like you just some small examples, is like you feel fidgety, you feel tense, constantly moving your legs, restlessness, feelings of numbness in your arms. And then for some people, they exercise it excessively. So those are just some examples of flight responses. Next is freeze. It's your body's inability to move or act when there is a threat. So again, it's a sense of dread. Sometimes you'll get pale skin. Sometimes your hands will get cold as well. You feel stiff, you feel numb. Sometimes you can hear your own heart rate. So those are just some examples of freeze. I've definitely done that as well. And then fawn, for my people pleasers. These are for my people pleasers. This is what we do when sometimes there's a threat. It's our body's response to please someone to avoid a conflict. These are my high people pleasers. So a lot of times we over-agree. We tend to be over-helpful, and our primary concern is to make someone else happy, to relieve whatever the tense or stress, or to make sure that they don't become angry. So again, the responses are fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And so those are what we call in the therapy world the 4 Fs. Tyler, anything you wanted to add? And if anybody had a question, please don't hesitate to ask. You good, Tyler? Okay.
Yep,
Sorry.
we are good to go.
Okay. All right. So we've gotten to anger is not the problem. Again, as we've continued to say in this space, it is the negative behavior that you do. We are really big on separating the behavior and the feeling. There is nothing wrong with being angry. Now, what you do with that, the negative behavior, that's what's essentially viewed negatively. So again, if I'm throwing something, or if I curse somebody out, that behavior should be the thing that's viewed negatively. But of course they coincide, they combine together, and they're like, oh man, she's just angry, such forth like that. But again, anger is truly not the problem, because like what we talked about a little bit earlier, anger is truly important because it's a protector and it lets us know that injustice was done. Sal, anything you wanted to add to that? Or if anybody have any questions as well?
Good to go.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to share one of my anger stories. Okay.
It's my favorite part.
I'm going to show my hand. Hopefully you can see it. So that I have like 2 scars right there. I got these 2 scars because I was an athlete in college, and there was a lot of tension going on with my teammates and I. I was on the track and field team. There was just this surmounting issues that were happening. And one day, my teammate, we were after a team meeting, my teammate got in my face, and I did. Woo, thank the Lord. When I say in my face, I'm talking about like inches from my face. And she was upset because she didn't get her way. And she was upset because she felt like, because I was a team captain. So I would tell my coach, hey, such and such has an issue, please go talk to them. So she thought I was telling my coach everything that happened. I was like, no. So she made me so angry that I had to call another teammate who was not there. She was like my go-to person. I had to call my other teammate, and I said, hey, I don't know where you at, but you need to get here now because it's about to go down. And she was like, literally said, I could still hear her. She said, Scarlett, don't do anything. And I'm like, I can't promise nothing, so you better get here. She was all the way on the other side of campus. So then what ended up happening was I saw another one of my teammates who was by the front door. And she was close with the girl who got in my face. And I said to her, keep her the F away from me. And what I ended up doing is I ended up punching a brick wall. So what ended up happening was these 2 fingers were down here because I was so enraged. I was so angry. And everybody, and this is the blackout. This is the rage, how anger got to rage. I blacked out. Everybody who was in that locker room, I didn't remember anybody in that locker room, but my other teammates came up to me. They're like, man, we heard your bones crack. And I was like, what? I just didn't see it. And so like, I'm so angry, I'm walking away. It took my athletic trainer, my coach and my strength coach to come grab me, and not physically, but say, hey, you need to go to the training room. Your hand is broken. I said, no, it's not, because I didn't feel the pain. I said, no, it's not. But when I looked down, it was like a softball size swelling that I had, but I could still move my fingers, and literally my bones were sitting on top of each other like this. They weren't even connected. I remember feeling so ashamed afterwards and being like, God, why did I allow that to get me to there? And I just remember just feeling like so much shame, because it was my senior year. I was like about to, it was the goal was for me to get to nationals and such, for being a contributor. But that one moment took it all away from me, because I decided to punch a brick wall. And I remember that teammate being super, super scared of me. And I didn't like that. And I remember going up to her and be like, it's not you. It's all has been forgiven. It's me. That's something I got to work on. And I honestly, to this day, I truly thank God I did not hit my teammate, because honestly, I don't think I would be out here in the public. I truly don't believe that, because for what that really, like I said, indicated to me was that I had so much going on underneath me that I needed to figure out, so I don't get to that space of anger or rage. So that's my anger story.
I'm always so thankful whenever you share that story, Scarlett, because I think that it always is a great impact for our attendees. Do you mind sharing just for a bit? I know we're pressed for time, but do you mind sharing just a little bit of how maybe, because we've been talking about how anger is a secondary emotion. So can you share a little bit about how maybe if there was a buildup and what that looked like in your situation leading up to that moment?
For sure. Yeah. I was having a lot of challenges at home with my folks, with my family, and there was a lot of pressure for me to do what they were asking me to do. But I was 2.5 hours away, but there was still the expectation for me to perform and to do as if I was there. And so it was the tension of what was going on within my teammates. And then it was the academic pressure, because of course it's my senior year. You have to make sure everything is in line in order so that you make sure that you're on pace to graduate. Because this happened in my last semester while I was at school. And so there was that pressure of figuring out graduation. God, it was quite a bit, a lot. And then of course I was thinking about like, okay, what am I going to do after I graduate? Where am I going to move? Where am I going to be? What's the job I'm going to get? So it's all of those things that were compounding that I just kept, and I didn't share with anybody. I just kept it all to myself. So I'm sitting here literally suffering in silence because I didn't learn how to air it out effectively or appropriately. So it was all those things. And then it was, then like my sister back in Orlando got in, I had to go to the hospital. So she had to be admitted to ER because she had got an unforeseen medical disease. So it was all those things that were just building up more and more into where it was just like, golly, this is a lot. Even me talking about it, it makes me feel like overwhelmed. But that's what I was going through at that time. It was just all of that. But everybody, because everybody was just like, oh man, you should have hit her. I said, nah. And I just said, no, that wouldn't have been good. I said, because it wasn't her. That was me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that leads into maybe the next portion or leading into towards the end of our conversation, where you'd share some of the things that maybe helped you out then, that you're able to, there it is, they're able to share with our attendees today.
For sure. So again, if you have questions, comments, please don't hesitate to put in the chat or let me know. So again, one of the ways you can start sharing your anger healthily is sometimes you got to stop and take a break immediately. The really big thing is to use, like what we've talked about, is conscious thinking. This front part of our brain, again, is our decision maker. We have to activate this. So again, and versus not letting the emotion take over. Other big thing is we talk about is how to do it, is to Google like a 5-minute guided breathing exercise. Part of the event summary, as I put in the worksheet, 50 ways to relax. I use that because that's how I do kite flying. I keep a kite in my car, and that's how I got cloud watching. I think one of the other ones they have on there is was to smell candles. So I thought that was pretty cool. Next is talk to a trusted adult or a friend. Not go to the people who you know will help you, not who you think will help you. So again, and again, we break all that down in our Know Your Feelings class. So again, if you go to YouTube, you can watch the replay of that. Use a feelings wheel. Please use the feelings wheel. Identify your surface, middle, and root layers, root feelings, and then share with that emotionally safe person. It is important to do those things because, again, those are the things that, like what we've been talking about, you got to give that thing or those negative feelings, just like we give our positive feelings an airing, got to give those negative feelings an airing as well, especially when it comes to if we're feeling anger. And then lastly, journal your feelings, write them down, video blog, use art, scribble, color your scribbles. I'm a big color my scribbles type person. So it's utilizing, because a lot of times people think you just kind of have to write a paragraph. No, you can write a list of your thoughts. You can just write randomly what I always say is don't limit yourself. It can be whatever you want it to be. So those are just, again, some just quick tips that we want to give you all that you could start using immediately when you start feeling angry. Again, is stop and take a break, use the feelings wheel, and journal your feelings. And due to time, we don't have time to do our guided breathing exercise, but don't worry, we will figure out how to send it to you all because I love doing this exercise. So with that being said,
welcome to your 5-minute guided.
Stop it. So that concludes our presentation, our what's underneath your anger. Again, we want to thank you all for all the technical difficulties we were having, but all the community conversation that we had. Again, if you have questions in regards to what we presented tonight, please don't hesitate to ask. Celie, I think you have the survey. So if you all could fill out the survey for us, because that helps us quite a bit about and how we can continue to ask for more funding to continue to have them be sponsored. It truly does help us. And again, for those on Facebook Live or rewatching this, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. We will definitely get to them for sure. So with that being said, I'm going to shoot it back over to Celie, who is our guru, which we appreciate. So he can close us on out.
Hello.
But thank you. I really appreciate it.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Yeah, so I was able to practice all those things that you guys were talking about because of the technical difficulties we're dealing with here. But yeah, we will be back next week. I think it's running away a 2-part series. And we will send out the link for our videos on this, but we do appreciate everyone for showing up here, both on the Zoom chat and on Facebook Live. Man, it was fun. I can't wait to tell you the story of how we figured out what the feedback was, but that really did test my anger. But everyone have a great weekend. For those folks who are off tomorrow celebrating Veterans Day, I will be off tomorrow. God bless America. And those soldiers who fought for us. I think we have 2 soldiers right here too. So both Sala and Scarlett served in the military. So we appreciate your service. But have a good night, everyone. Signing off.
Appreciate you. See us next week. Vanaka, thank you so much for everybody who joined.
Yep, you can stop our live.
I think
Was I recording the live?